Hello, friends. Good morning. And today we will talk about the Indian democratic system and Indian political system. I think our program is being watched globally, and even though everybody knows about Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, but people may not be knowing globally about the intricacies of the uh, political system. So I will briefly explain the political system which is prevalent in India, and then move on to the presidential elections which are going to be held next month. So let's look at the democracy in India. The democracy in India has been designed in such a way that there are no absolute center of powers. There is of course the leader of the government is the prime minister who runs the government. At the same time, there is a president who basically supersedes the prime minister, and until and unless president approve everything, no policy or no law is implemented. So you have a entity called president, which is also elected. Prime minister is also elected. Then the prime minister reports to parliament, which is also comprised of the elected members. And there is the president, who actually supersedes all of that, and the president is the supreme commander of the armed forces. So it is not the prime minister who manages the armed forces, and all both of these entities can be removed by the chief justice of India, who in turn is appointed by the elected members. So there is no absolute center of power in India as per the political system. So that is point number one. We can go in details, but I think in order to keep the details short, I just want to clarify, especially to the international viewers, that the president and the prime minister and the member of parliament are not the absolute power. They cannot enjoy absolute power in Indian democratic system, Indian political system. Now we are going through the presidential election. A lot of heated campaigns are being run right now, and what is so special there, I would like to explain in today's video. First of all, I have to again briefly give constitution of the parliament. Indian parliament has two houses, which is Lok Sabha, also known as lower house, and Rajya Sabha, which is known as upper house. The lower house members are directly elected by the public, and when the public casts their vote, then each vote value is 1. That means if I am voting, my my votes value will be 1, and all of these votes are counted, and based on that, different members are elected into Lok Sabha. So direct transfer of mandate from public to the member of parliament happens in Lok Sabha. Uh, Now, similarly, so that is the Indian government. Indian government has certain jurisdiction and certain responsibilities. However, there are India is a very large country, and when we talk about India, there are 29 states and union territories. Each of these 29 states have again local elected governments, and the governments in these states are known as assemblies. So while we have the parliament at the central level, which controls the India as a nation, then there are states within India which are managed by the assemblies, and those member of assemblies are also elected by the public in election. And the MLAs, as we know them in India, the member of legislative assemblies, their vote is also casted in a similar manner. That means the people, when they are voting for the MLAs, just similar to MPs, their votes value is 1. That means you are selecting your local person who will run the local government, and you are also selecting the government at the center. So there are two types of election which happens in India, which is selecting the local government and selecting the government at the central. And so you know that there is no absolute power with the central government, and there is no absolute power with the state government. The responsibilities are divided. Unlike many other countries where there are absolute powers, here in India none of the political class people who actually manage the government and governance can enjoy absolute power. There is always a combination and permutation which happens even while running the government, and government cannot decide something which they feel is right. There are checks and balances everywhere, and even if the central government pass resolution, the choice lies with the state government to implement and not to implement. It is not mandatory, because they are also running an assembly, and they can decide in the by casting vote to implement a central government order or disagree with that. So this is a true federal system in India that we have, and there is no absolute power center. Even though in the news and in the media it may appear that there are few power centers, but I just want to clarify that there are no power centers in India. And by the way, friends, we are live right now, and if you want to send in your suggestions, use the chat function in social media, and your message will be flashed here. Now, when it comes to selecting the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house, they are directly selected by the assemblies. The members of Rajya Sabha are selected by the assemblies, and so the Lok Sabha people are selected by the direct transfer of vote mandate, and people then come and sit with the choice of the people, majority choice of the people, while the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house, people are selected by the state. So you must be hearing these news that it is one-sided government which is running, but that is not the case here in India, because state have the equal mandate in running the central government. So the central government is being run by the lower house, and the governance of the lower house is taken care by the Rajya Sabha, where the members are selected by the state. So states not only run the state governments, they also overlook the functioning of the central government. So the power is not absolute. The state also looks at what decisions the Lok Sabha is taking, and in case they are not happy with those decisions, they can shut that decision down in Rajya Sabha. And once the both houses passes the resolution, it goes to the president for sign off. Now the president is not in any obligation to sign off anything which is passed by both houses of the parliament. He can send it back once for further review. So even president have choice to sign off anything which is happening in India or not to sign. Now the timing of these three entities, which is Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and actually four entities, which is state governments, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and the President of India, is spread across midway across each houses. So that means even if the central government changes, it will not change anything in the governance of India, because the state elections will continue as we proceed further in time. There are no centralized elections. So elections are happening every 2 to 3 months in India. So the process of political system is so transparent here in India that no person can claim that they are the leader or the king or sort of monarch or dictator in India, because there are elections being held. There are different times at which the people are selected and they are rejected by the people. And today we would like to talk about the president. Now, if you have any question on this political system, you can send it to me and I can respond to you, or you can do it later also once the live session is over. Well, president is selected by something called the Election Commission of India. First of all, the president of India is selected by democratic process, and the process is that the selected member of the member of parliament and the MLAs, which are the member of legislative assemblies, basically cast vote to select their choice of candidate. So there is a election which is going on indirectly. That means the public select both MPs and the MLAs, who in turn select the president. So there is an indirect transfer of electoral mandate reaching the President of India, whereas in case of Prime Minister, it's a direct transfer of mandate. So in President, it's indirect. In case of Prime Minister, it's direct. Um, so all the elections in India are conducted by the Election Commission, which is an independent body, just like the justice system in India, which is not part of the governance system at all. The judges in India do not report to any government, and likewise, Election Commission does not report to any. They are an independent body, and the chief election commissioner is although appointed by the government, but do not report to the government. And there are checks and balances to appoint an election commissioner and also remove the election commissioner. So there are a lot of this matrix organization which runs here in India, and that is why even election commission is not the absolute power, but their responsibility is to run the government during the period where the elections are going on, for example, like 20 days or 30 days, and then they will transfer the power back to the elected government, and they also conduct the election. So they have a fair means of conducting the election. There are different methods they use. So all the elections, including the president elections, are being conducted by the Election Commission of India. Now let's look at the qualification for president. The president has to be minimum 35 years of age, and the presidential candidate must qualify the qualification set for the Lok Sabha member, which is the lower house member. So if he is qualified to become a member of Lok Sabha and his age is 35 years, he then qualifies to stand in the election for president. So that means the qualification for the member of parliament is same as the qualification for the president to become president in India. However, the process of elections are slightly different, since it is based on the proportional voting, and it is also known as electoral college method, and I will explain in the next slide how this election happens. And the concept is called proportional voting. Proportional voting is dependent on the amount of vote a person gets for him to get selected into legislative assembly in the state or member of parliament at the center. So say for example, there is one member of parliament who's coming in from a place which has lower people, I mean number of people are less, the population of people who are casting vote for this particular person's election are say 100,000. So his value will be based on 100,000. So typically there is a complex mathematics which determines the value, which is always 1 plus. So one vote for himself and plus based on certain criteria based on his constituency population, and that will be the voting value of the member of parliament. So roughly in the parliament, the voting value on an average is about 708 per member of parliament. So that does not fluctuate too much. But when it comes to the states, because the MLAs are also casting vote, the value of MLA's vote, individual MLA vote, will fluctuate drastically, because there are certain MLAs who will come from very highly populated areas and their vote value will increase substantially, and whereas in the same state the MLAs may come from a less populated area, their value will be lesser. So a person who is selected by more population will have a higher value, and a person who is selected by less people will have a lower value. That is just a simple method of understanding, and the value of the vote will be 1 plus x. The x is determined by, say for example, let me explain that also, that when the if there are 100,000 people have voted for a particular member of parliament or an MLA, the value will be calculated based on 100,000 divided by 1000 into number of MLAs and so on and so forth. So I think there is a more complex mathematics around it. But I think the more important thing is to understand that each MLA's value is different and may vary drastically. And because of this proportional voting method, say for example, if there are 50 people who are voting for one particular presidential candidate, out of 50, 40 have voted for one candidate and 10 would have voted for another one. Now the chances are that the person who have voted, the 10 people who have voted for one candidate may win, become victorious. Now you would ask how that can happen, because the value of the vote of the 40 MLAs will be drastically less than the value of the vote of the 10 MLAs. So that is the difference here, and that is why the mathematics of proportional voting is quite complex. And roughly, as I said, the president is selected indirectly. So roughly, there are about about a million votes which are casted for selecting the president. There could be more than more than two candidates at any point in time, or two at least, because we seldom see any consensus candidate. So there is always a election, and based on the votes casted by the MLAs, because MLAs votes may have more value here, because the MP vote number of votes are by and large fixed, which is 708 is the value of each vote. But the MLAs in each state will have more value of the vote, and say for example, the state also from where the MLAs are casting their vote will also determine how much weightage and value they will bring to the presidential candidate. Say for example, state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest state in terms of population, and they have more than 400 MLAs in that state to run the government, local government. The value and the population is also very high in Uttar Pradesh. The value of the votes which are casted in Uttar Pradesh alone is about 140,000 votes. So out of a million votes, 140,000 votes are coming just from one state, and rest of the states will have lesser value because the population in others 28 states and union territories are lesser. And that is why the presidential election is really mind-boggling mathematics. You can imagine that there is so much political activity goes on to select the president, in terms of calculations, in terms of who will cast vote, and which MLA is more valuable, because that MLA will have more weightage in order to select the presidential candidate. And once these votes are counted, these elections are conducted by the Election Commission of India, and the voting happens inside the assemblies and the parliament. And when the voting happens, it's off limit. That means public is not voting here, and any vote which is casted outside the assembly will not be counted. So all these regulations and there is no proxy vote here. So necessarily the MLAs and MPs will have to walk into the parliament to cast their vote, and if they do not go there, then they will not be able to cast their vote on a proxy. So that is, there are certain other regulations also, who can cast vote, who cannot cast vote, but ultimately everybody has to reach the floor of the assembly or floor of the parliament to cast their vote. Once the votes are casted, these are casted on a special piece of paper, and they are counted by the election commissions, and based on that the election commission announces the selected candidate who will become the president for 5 years. And when they become president, they'll go and live inside the presidential house, which is called Rashtrapati Bhavan. So current president is Mr. Ramnath Kovind, who is he has already completed 5 years, and the next election date is 18th of July, and the election will be held based on the method that I explained in today's video. I think it's going to be very exciting to see how the push and pull between the state and the central government happens, and how the presidents are elected. And as I said, the states government have more say in selecting the candidate which they prefer, who will basically head the Indian governance system. So you can imagine that while keep hearing the news about federalism, etc., the federalism is very strong here in India, and the states have more control on Rajya Sabha and also on the presidential candidate to select their own candidate, who will then supersede everything else. So friends, do let me know what you feel about this. If you have any comments or any suggestions, I would be more than happy to answer those. Probably we can do research and I can get back to you on that if you have any difficult question. Otherwise, if you have any thoughts, I will respond to you immediately as soon as I receive your message. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next edition of Morning Brew next Friday, same time. And for today, I like to say goodbye.